Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, The Curly Nest. My name is JL, and today I'm going to be sharing with you birth story number 4. I have been wanting to share all the details for a while, but of course there was postpartum recovery and other things that came up in life. So if you want to hear more about the birth of our 4th baby, just keep on watching. All right, y'all, so get cozy. I've got my nice warm blanket here as I get ready to share the details with you, but welcome back to another candid couch conversation. And today, like I mentioned, I'm gonna be sharing with you the details of the birth of our 4th baby. So to start off, per usual, I went late. So my due date was actually September 23rd, my husband's birthday, and I didn't end up having baby number 4 until October 8th. So I'll touch on that as well. I was very late. I was 42 weeks and 1 day when we served the eviction notice for baby number 4 because there were so many factors around that, which I will share more about, but I did not think I would go that late. And we had the same birth team, which was wonderful. The same midwife who has birthed all 3 of our other babies also was able to be here to birth for our 4th baby. So I had so much peace about that. I wanted to do another water birth because I have yet to fully birth in the water. It is still a goal of mine. And so we had all of that set up, but there were a couple of things before I share about what actually happened when labor started that made this birth a little different. So to be perfectly honest, this birth was a lot more stressful, but I just felt there were just kind of one thing after another where I was like, okay, Lord, I have to give this to you, but it is making me anxious. One of those being that I had gone so late. I've only gone as late as 41 weeks with baby number 2 and baby number 3. So making it to the 42 week mark was different for me. And that was brought on a whole bunch of different conversations because, you know, Western medicine world and traditional doctors, which I'm super grateful for, have a different opinion than more holistic, natural home birthing, you know, midwifery care. So really praying for wisdom and discernment on what to do, trying to be wise, but not wanting to be fear-mongered because there is a lot of fear over going past 42 weeks. But I had no complications with my pregnancy. It was smooth. The only thing that came up this time was I did test positive for GBS. With all of my other pregnancies, I had tested negative. So that was an additional kind of stressor. Oh my goodness. Stressor, my little pterodactyl stressor that I didn't have to deal with my other births. And so the midwife and I had a conversation and my husband about some things that we could do to just set myself and baby up for success, besides antibiotics as well, because I really didn't want to wipe my gut microbiome and baby's gut microbiome if I didn't have to. And so we talked about the pros, the cons, the risks, things like that. And thank the Lord, baby was perfect, no complications, thank the Lord. We just had to monitor the baby for the first 24 to 48 hours. But typically you'll know if there are problems with the baby pretty quickly after the birth. So we just took vitals and things like that, monitored, and everything was fine, made sure to nurse a lot. So I was very grateful to the Lord for that. So that was one added stressor. Also, like I said, going so late was a second added stressor, just not wanting to listen to the pressures of people because so many people were asking me, are you going to be induced? Oh, you're past 40 weeks. And I was so tired of all of the questions. And I know people cared. I know it came from a place of caring. And nothing against, let me say this to mamas and other people that are watching, nothing against being induced. But I do think there is a time and a place for induction, and in my personal opinion, I think that it is pushed and overused too much, more so than it needs to be, and not in a situation where it actually is a necessity. And there are pros and cons and risks to that as well, that I think we just need to educate ourselves as mothers to know what to expect. Just taking all of that into account. Also, my wonderful midwife that has helped birth all my babies, she was scheduled to go on a trip out of the country 2 days before I had our fourth baby. And I'm telling you this now, I didn't know it at the time, but that was also why we had some conversations of what can we do to get labor moving along if we're going over the 42-week mark. We did checks every couple of days. Everything was great. So there was a lot of monitoring, a lot of intentionality and safety on the part of the midwife that I was working with, and just the midwifery care in general. And that is very key and important, because if you have those vitals being taken and if you have the monitoring, then you don't have to be fearful, you know. And it's different for every other person. I have not had any losses so far. I haven't had any past birth trauma. It is different for every mom, and I completely understand if someone makes a different decision because just of different things in life or different things that they've had to go through regarding birth and labor and delivery. And so I am a big component of just being informed and educated, informed consent as well about anything that has to do with birth, and ultimately you and your spouse making the decision that is best for you and your family, especially around labor and delivery, because that's a big deal in and of itself, besides all of the other factors. And so I just say all of that to say that this was something that worked for us specifically, and we had different factors to consider than other people might, or other mamas might. And so I also was kind of feeling the pressure of that, because there's a whole slew of wonderful midwives and doulas in the area. I'm so blessed by that. But I loved having her, and she is extremely experienced and has advocated for moms and babies in this area for so long. And I knew that I would be able to relax and my body would be able to progress in birth the best that it possibly could with having her there. Literally, like the minute she steps in the door, I'm just like, okay. She's just wonderful. And so I knew that she had a trip scheduled, but we never imagined that I would be going this late. So I thought, oh, no problem. The baby will be here before she leaves, and the clock is ticking and baby still hasn't arrived. So we then talked about what we could do to get things going. I had done some natural induction things with my first, but I always kind of had this uncertainty of, was that the right choice? Should we have done that? Should we not have done that? And so I really wanted things to just start naturally on its own as best as possible. So yeah, all these things in my mind. I knew my midwife was going to go away on this trip, and then she also had some personal things going on at the time where she had some backup midwives and assistants in case she couldn't be there besides her trip that was upcoming. So that was something that I also had to give to the Lord, because I ultimately I wanted her there, but I also wanted her there where she could be fully present. I knew she would no matter what, because she's amazing. But when you have your own personal things going on, it's hard to focus the same way. And I just I cared about her, and I also wanted to know you get these things taken care of, and you take the time that you need, and the Lord will work it out. And he did, because it was what she had to deal with was wrapped up in a couple of days, and she said, okay, we're back on. So that was a huge blessing as well. And another God moment was as my due date came and went, and I was getting close to the 42-week mark, I was a part of a mom's group, and two moms in that mom's group shared stories about how they had used castor oil to naturally induce labor and shared their stories around it, the dosages, things like that. And so I really feel that was something that the Lord used in just kind of a God moment, because they both had success with it. And so I thought, you know what, Lord, maybe this is something that I should consider. And so we did end up doing that, and I'll share more about that later on. But that was another kind of stressor for me, not only the late due date, the things going on with my midwife, her trip coming up, the GBS positive, and then trying to decide if we were going to induce or not. And so I was just like, Lord, like, I know there's so much around birth that I cannot control, but it just feels like there's one thing after another coming up, and it's a little bit much to deal with, especially with the pregnancy hormones. So, but he was faithful. He was faithful. He's always been faithful to us. And so now I'm going to share with you what happened when labor started. Okay, so on October 8th, which was a Wednesday, I decided to start taking the castor oil. I had an appointment, I think a day or two beforehand with my midwife. We talked about it, the pros and cons. And I decided like, this is something that I want to try. I remember I told myself, okay, I'm going to start at 9 in the morning, because pretty much every 3 hours I needed to take a dosage. I do remember still being very honestly stressed and anxious that morning, just anticipating labor coming, because I didn't know when it would start, didn't know how long, didn't know how intense. And so I was pretty nervous and cranky, to be honest. And I was outside with the kiddos. We were playing for a little bit. I took the first dose of castor oil in a protein smoothie at 9 a.m. And we played, we, did our usual routine. And then I took another dose at 12:30. Had some light cramps, but no consistent contractions to where I knew, okay, labor is starting. So still kind of a waiting game. So the anticipation was killing me. So we got the kids lunch, we got them settled down for naps, which was really good. And I would say maybe closer to 3 o'clock. It was before I was about to take the third dose, because I was going to take it every 3 hours, and I wanted to start in the morning, not in the afternoon, not at night, because if things did pick up, I didn't want it starting at night and me not being able to get some sort of sleep and then be just exhausted and kind of running on fumes from the beginning. Not that you sleep very great towards the end of pregnancy anyway, but I think you catch my drift, just trying to be smart about it and trying to plan as best as possible, of course, for a situation that is out of your control ultimately. And so I remember around 3 o'clock, we usually have quiet time or nap time for our kids from 1 to 3:30 at the time. And so I remember around 3 o'clock, I started to feel a little bit more crampy and just uncomfortable, maybe like things were getting going. So I didn't make another batch. So I just want to tell you, the castor oil worked, and it worked pretty quickly, because by 3:30 p.m. I started having contractions. They were gradual, which was really great. So I felt really good about that. It wasn't this intense thing that I was picturing. And it worked out perfectly, because I said, hey hun, why don't you call your mom? My mother-in-law always watches the kids. She has for every birth except for the first, of course. She's been a huge help. They're comfortable with her. I have so much peace when I am laboring, because I know my kids are happy, they are safe, they are comfortable, and that helps my body be able to relax and do what it needs to do. And they only live a couple streets away from us, so it's just wonderful. And I said, why don't you call your mom to come and get them? So she came and picked up the kids. They got to nap here. They finished their naps in quiet time. She came and got them. And that is when my first contractions started. Everything was ready. I think I called my midwife about like an hour into contractions. I started timing them. There always comes a point where I stop timing them, but I just wanted her there sooner rather than later, and sooner than I had for my other births. I just felt more comfortable with that. So she came and I felt like I was able to relax a little bit more. And so this time around, anytime I sat down, whether it was on the couch or on the toilet, my contractions started picking up. That was the ideal spot for me this labor and delivery, and before that wasn't the case. So I just remember sitting down and starting to feel my water breaking, and I was like, okay, stay calm, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's crazy because this is fourth baby. I've gone through it before, but the nerves are still there, you know? And this is just my story. The nerves, the anxiety, the anticipation, the excitement, they're all still there. And so don't feel like you have to have it all figured out or you have to be this birth champ, you know, 4 babies in or 3 babies in, you know? It's just different each time you learn each time. And so I was surprised by that. And so I thought, oh, wow, this is kind of, you know, moving along. So once my water started to break, I then decided to go into the birthing tub just because it felt nicer, cleaner to me, and went in there, labored for a little bit, but that really started to slow things down. So anytime I sat down on the edge of the birthing tub, more of my water started to break, but I really couldn't sit down in the birthing tub. And so I remember getting out, drying off, and my midwife she's just so amazing. I can't say enough good things about her. And she said, hey JL, why don't you try just laboring on the toilet for just 3 contractions? And I said, okay, you know, we'll do that. And needless to say, I did not leave that bathroom until our 4th baby was born. And so I remember just staying there, and I remember sitting on the toilet. At one point I got down on the floor and I was in some very vulnerable positions. I'm so grateful for my husband. And I remember the midwife and the birth assistant just stayed in the living room, and my husband was there in the doorway of the bathroom while I labored. They just let me be, and I really appreciate that. And so I don't remember what time it was, but we're getting into the evening, and I'm trying not to watch the clock because, you know, kind of messes with my mind, but I'm kind of getting tired. But sitting and laboring in the bathroom, especially on the toilet, was really, really sped up my labor. It was growing in intensity. I stopped tracking the contractions and then just started focusing and listening to my body and what things felt like. I tried to breathe and relax my shoulders and just breathe the baby down and out. And so I lost track. I know my husband took videos of my labor, but I lost track of when I actually started to push. But it didn't take very long to push baby out. And I remember it being very intense, and I got down to the point where I got off of the toilet and I was kind of holding the toilet. Thank God I had cleaned the bathroom earlier because I would have been so grossed out. But I cleaned the toilet really well, and I was kind of holding on to the front and squatting down and rocking back and forth. And I don't know what it was, but I just kind of felt a shift down there in my body. And I remember telling my husband, the baby's coming. I don't know how I knew it, but moms just know. And I'd had enough experience with birthing my other ones that I was really starting to feel the pressure. And so, and also getting in my head, like, this is hard. And I thought to myself, when you think I can't do this, your baby's very close. So for those of you who get to that point, or this is your first labor and delivery and you're trying to do a home birth at home, if you ever get to the point where you think, I cannot do this, this is too intense, your baby's close. And so that helped me mentally, because I knew, okay, JL, this is intense. You're gonna feel a lot of pressure. You're just gonna want this baby out. Take it slow. And so I said, this baby's coming. He called the midwife and them in. They start setting up, their pads and everything. They brought the birthing stool and they said, why don't you try to sit on the birthing stool and go through one contraction? I couldn't even make it through one contraction. It was way too painful for me, too intense. I pushed that thing away and I was just like, no. And I got down in a squat, rocked back and forth. And I want to say it only took a couple contractions. And I don't know how long I pushed for. It didn't seem for that long. And throughout the process of me laboring on the toilet, more of my water was breaking. And so this was very intense. And I think just kind of pent up stress. I didn't feel as in control of my breathing or as calm as other labor and deliveries. And so my husband was really helpful. We kind of talked about this afterward, but I started to get higher. I wasn't screaming, and I was like moaning and groaning low, but it started to get more high pitched, and he recognized that. And so he was, as it started to do that, because I just felt it really intense, and I don't know why I didn't think when it came time to push to get back into the water, I stayed like holding on to the toilet bowl, kind of bearing down that way. But it was so much more intense for me personally to labor outside of the water than in the water. I think someone called it nature's like natural epidural, basically, or equivalent of epidural, like being in the water. And it was true for me. And I don't say that to scare anybody who wants to do it out of the water. I just say for me personally, I really love birthing in the water because I feel like it does kind of take the edge off. So next time I told my husband, if I get to the point of pushing, get me back in that pool, okay? Because I do not like pushing outside of the water. That's what I've learned. And so that was so much more intense. And so I started to feel myself not get panicky, but a little bit more high pitch. And my husband told me that he started to feel like, oh, and he's always the one that's like calm, cool, collected. And so he told me, he's like, hun, breathe low, like breathe the baby out. Keep it nice and deep. And that's what I needed to hear. He's like, you're close. And he just calmed like both of us down because I was starting to get louder, but in a more panicked sense. What made it really intense was I kind of got stuck in the crowning position, which is the most intense position. And kind of like with my third, each push, it wasn't like one or two pushes the heads out and then the rest of the body. Each one of my babies has needed help. And sure enough, baby number 4 had like a little hand right here, and my midwife had to kind of help gently to bring an arm out like this. And then the rest of the baby's body just came out. And I just remember just this sense of, like when the baby was finally out, again, needing that pause like I had with my previous 2 births at home, and it just being so intense and having help, the baby being out. And I remember the baby coming out and the baby being placed, kind of on the floor between my legs. And I kind of like took a moment to breathe. And I think my husband might have looked and then said, hey, hun, do you want to see if it's a boy or a girl? Or he said something, one of them said something along those lines. I remember just like looking back and just being in shock because it ended up being a little boy. And I remember my oldest daughter prayed and she was like, Mama, I really would like a baby brother. And I said, well, honey, we don't know if it's going to be a boy or a girl, but either one will be super happy. And we genuinely were, me and my husband. If it was going to be another girl, we have 4 beautiful girls. If it was going to be a boy, we have our first boy. Win-win, either way. And she was thrilled to find out that it was a boy. And he was born at 8:28 p.m. So I started my labor at 3:30 p.m. and almost literally 5 hours later, he was out. And he was a big boy. My third baby was still my biggest, but he was 8 pounds, 14 ounces. And I remember looking back and just, being in shock. Like, it's a boy, oh my goodness. I was not, towards the end, I was definitely 50-50, probably more leaning towards it being a boy just because of when conception happened and things like that. And my husband was pretty sure too towards the end that it was a boy, but I just still wasn't expecting it. And so that was a really sweet surprise. And he has just been the sweetest baby. He's laid back, he's chill, he doesn't fuss a lot. And we named him Eli Tobias. And so that is the birth story of baby number 4. We got a baby boy, our first boy, and it has been so special. I absolutely love having girls, and it's a totally different relationship with the girls. But there's something just so different and sweet, and each one's unique, right? And moms out there who have boys and girls, you know what I mean. You don't love one more than the other. You don't have a preference over a certain gender, but they both have their challenges, and they both have things that are so beautiful about dealing with each gender. And so I'm so grateful to the Lord that I get to experience having a boy and a girl, because I thought to myself when I had him a little bit later on, I'm like, oh, now I'll be able to do a mother-son dance when he gets married. And if I had all girls, I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's something that I would not necessarily miss out on, but now I get to partake in it. And it's been so fun. So thank you guys so much for listening to my birth story of baby number 4, our sweet, sweet Eli. If you like videos like this, please comment down below and give it a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe and you turn on your notifications so you can get notified of all of the other videos that are going to be coming. And if there's any videos that you would like to see, please let me know, because I love to hear from all of you. So thank you again so much. Hope you enjoyed this story and that it was encouraging to you. And I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys. I love you. Love you.